Hello, everyone. My name is Victor Yates for the Black Alphabet Film Festival, a festival that centers Black LGBTQ plus stories. And I am so excited to chat with Jewel Ivy, who is a film and TV writer, producer, and director. Jewel's project, Exposed, was selected for the film festival. So before we get started, please tell us more about Exposed.
Okay. Well, expose actually comes from a proof of concept. So even though this is kind of like a proof of concept on its own, it came from a bigger or kind of like a smaller project called Exposure. So exposure transitioned to expose. And it's just it was my undergrad thesis. Exposure was my undergrad thesis when I graduated with my BA from SCAD. And it follows basically the same story of Marcus basically potentially exposing his DL lover, Levi, through a photo submission through a competition. And he actually gets selected in Expose. We get to see everything that happens beforehand in Exposure. So it kind of was the proof to a proof so that we can expand the story and also expand the arcs of the characters, the plot, and kind of build more drama for these two lovers, I guess you could say. So that's kind of like where it came from.
Okay. Your short film Exposure.
Mhm.
So the main character Marcus he's a photographer.
Yes, he's an openly gay photographer. It's in a low country, so he lives in Savannah, Georgia. I chose that specifically just because I was living there for 6 months or 6 years, going to school there. So I felt like, and it was a good spot or a good setting to bring the attention to, I guess, when it comes to talking about Black queer life and Black queer stories that we kind of don't get to see in the low country. So it's
Okay.
kind of, I felt like that was a perfect spot for him to be in.
Okay. And what challenges did you face transforming the project from short film to the series?
Mm. Well, money. Finance was a big thing. So just because I've made 7 projects, independent projects, the budgets keep increasing.
Oh,
So when you're thinking about transitioning, like a short film can be made in a small budget,
yeah.
but a pilot or a television pilot is kind of like it's almost double or triple what you would think you would need.
Yeah.
Um, just because you're shooting a longer days or you're shooting more scenes in a day, so it's more time, more equipment, more everything. So I felt like finance was a big thing. I have a writers team called the Ivy Writers. It's like a development in-house development team that we work with, and we had already kind of outlined where we were going to take Marcus himself of like what we saw and what we wanted to do. So it was more about adding the elements of the other characters that you see. It's building out Levi's arc and Shazir's backstory and how the crime and drug drama come into this world. And that was kind of a lot of the development work that we had to do before we kind of actually got into writing the pilot or
Okay.
rewriting the pilot, because we wanted to know where we were going to take these characters and not just in one episode, but in like a full season. So it
Okay.
took a lot of development. We did about 6 months in development
Oh,
before we could actually have the confidence and say, okay, let's go ahead and order the script or order the actual pilot script to be made. And the
okay.
pilot script went through so many drafts to kind of get ready for that.
Okay.
But that's kind of like, I guess those were the two challenging portions. Besides, uh, I guess getting the production stuff of like getting locations and finding your talent and doing all that. But that's the fun stuff. I feel like that's the fun stuff for me. But I think those were the big challenges. Is just kind of getting the story together and getting the money in.
Okay. Okay. I want to say when you were 16, you wrote Bash the movie. And
Yes.
what was your experience like going from Bash with you wrote it individually
Mhm.
versus working with a team of writers for Exposed?
Wow. Great question. I've never been asked this question.
Ah,
I love this question. I think this is a
ah,
great question. Um, so writing by myself is like literally when you call, like when we before we got on here, I was writing. Um, and it's a different feeling. I feel like it's like you have, I mean, I have this goal or this motive that I have for this character, and I'm trying to get him to that. And I think that's kind of like what I had with Bash. It was more of like it's my first. I wasn't. It wasn't even like a full film. Like it was in a notebook, and I was literally writing it so old school. It was
ah,
like like it says Bash colon the line. Like it
yeah,
was very like old school and. But I think now writing with a team or having other brains and other minds that are coming together to kind of build this world or build a character, build a scene. It doesn't matter whether it's a line scene, like an entire project. It's relieving. I feel like it's more relieving
okay.
than anything, but it's also it's fun. Like
Ah,
I call it like darts. I call it when we're in the room and we don't have any, if I don't come in with any ideas and no one comes in with ideas, we'll just sit there and circle around the idea
okay.
and just throw darts. So I call it throwing darts. So throw anything out there and if it sticks, it lands. If it lands, it sticks. So that's kind of one thing that I enjoy about writing with a team is that there's endless ideas that you can always use. And even if that idea does not work, you put it down or you put it to the side and then you exercise that original idea that you wanted. And
Yeah.
then you get to see if that idea is better than the idea that y'all had proposed previous. And it's kind of like you get to just workshop some of those ideas, not just solo on yourself, because of course you're your biggest critique as a writer. So it's like you're not battling and saying, well, I wrote this yesterday, but I don't like this. You can have that back feedback and say, well, maybe you should just tweak it this, or maybe it doesn't need to be fully revamped. It could just be adjusted in some way to fit whatever. And I just love that the malleability of working with a team,
Yeah.
and not just working by yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that this was something that you took from your like thesis project in
Mhm.
undergrad with the character. And so for Exposed, you are the series director, you're one of the producers, and of course, you're the showrunner. And so describe that for me. Like, how did
Mm.
you go from script to set? Like that experience.
Oh, yeah. I love this. You're good, Victor. I love
Ah!
this. Script to set. Ugh, gosh. I don't want to give too much away because
Okay.
we have something that's coming.
Okay.
I don't want to give too much, but I can give you a little sneak peek.
Okay.
But
Okay.
we're working on a project that a fellow director, colleague of mine, had documented some stuff while we were shooting Exposed. So
Okay.
we're going to be releasing some information about that. So you get to see how it is working with the IB team
Oh,
from
cool.
script to finish.
Okay.
And it's a journey. It's a journey, but for me personally, it always starts with hats. I kind of think of it like a hat. I put on my rider's hat, and I wear all hats at the same time. That's kind of crazy. Like even
Yeah.
when I'm on set, I have my writer's hat on, I have the
Yeah.
producer hat on, even though I'm in a directorial stance. Like
Yeah.
I'm the director at that point.
Yeah.
But even within that, it's a difficult thing, I guess, from writing and envisioning
Yeah.
what you wrote from the paper, and then not just giving that to your producers and giving it to the immediate team, but giving it to the crew and
Yeah.
giving it to everybody, the cast, and letting them digest it. And you have this period like between prep week and when you sit the script off, or the last version of the script in prep week, which is the start of like production to me.
Yeah.
I have this feeling of like people about to ask me a whole bunch of questions.
Mm.
Like, and it's like is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Is this gonna go right? I don't know
Yeah.
how I feel about this. How do you want me to do this? How it's like all these questions, right?
Yeah.
So I felt comfortable enough that I had workshopped the script so much
Okay.
and I had took the time to do this that I didn't have that many questions when we got to prep week. It was very straightforward. I just had to kind of basically take off the writer's hat, become a producer, make sure things were in line, as
Okay.
in like we have the right location, the budget is in good standing. We have our cast are coming in on time, like everything's falling into play. Because I
Okay.
do have other people that run that's their job. But
Okay.
I just overview that. But then as a director, it's more of relinquishing the writing aspect, saying basically F what you wrote on the page. You're
Okay.
in the moment now. Not to say that what you wrote on the page is not important. It
Yeah.
got you to where you are today, but take a breather. You know the story, you know what you want, you've envisioned it. Now just bring it to life and actually actively bringing it to life. Whether it doesn't match or not, it's not going
Okay.
to match what you see. Every writer, I look at scripts and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's totally not what I wrote. Like, and coming to screen, like looking at it on screen. But that's the evolution of filmmaking, and that's the beauty of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Taking that and just adapting it and showing it visually, and even if it's not correct of how you saw it in your mind, but seeing it come to life is always a rewarding feeling. So I think it's just letting go of the pressure of trying to be correct and trying to be exact to what I wrote, or being true to just being true to what I wrote rather
Okay.
than being exact.
Okay.
That's the beauty I think about going from script to screen. I think that's the fun part of that part. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Let's keep the director's hat on.
Okay.
Um, I am curious about from Bash, the first project that you directed, to Exposed. How did your directorial style change between those projects?
Mm. Ooh. Well, Bash was interesting. I felt like I didn't have directorial style in my first, I would say, roughly 3 projects.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that. I will say that with confidence. Bash and What Was Left and Lucid, I didn't have much of a directorial style. It was more of experimentation. It was more of me getting familiar and comfortable with showcasing not just my writing, but being behind the camera and being a director and learning the facets and the emotions, the self confidence, and the stance that you are in as a director. I think that's something that you have to get adjusted to. And I think everybody loves to be a director. Everybody wants to be a director, but it takes confidence and it takes
Yeah.
will and power and leadership. So I had to take a. It took a while to kind of get comfortable in that standpoint for me, I didn't submit. We didn't submit any. I think we didn't submit any of our films up to Exposure
Okay.
into a film festival. And Exposure was came out in 2020.
Okay.
So for like about 4 years, I didn't release anything just because I wasn't confident in my directorial style or my directorial, skill set.
Okay.
So it was once we got into 569, which was our fourth project, we kind of I started to see it. I started to see kind of what I wanted to make, what kind of stories I wanted to make, and what influences I was attracted to, like as in directors or just visionaries or visuals that appealed to me
Okay.
as a filmmaker or
Okay.
just as a person that likes content. And I just started to study that. I started to study it more than, and I started to study in school, started studying off school, and then I started to see how certain elements started to change. Just because I said, "Oh, wow, well, I like that," and that's kind of
Okay.
what I want.
Okay.
And the cinematography started to change, the lighting started to change,
Oh, okay.
the characters themselves, just because I was seeing how character development is so important to plot and how that motivates plot. I started to rework characters. I started to reimagine characters and said, I want a character that resembles like this but acts like this. So it started to just blend together. And then that I think that's what creates a directorial style. All these elements that you see when it comes to cinematography, your production design, all of these things, they all play a factor into this painting that you're putting onto screen. And I think
Okay.
it wasn't really until like 5, 6, 9 exposure, this latter part of my now where we are now, I guess you could say, in the last 2 to 3 years in the past, is where I started to see the directorial style really come into play. And you get to see that really with exposure. Our film Zir that's coming out soon, and
Okay.
then Exposed, you get to see that they're in a similar bracket of tone, colors, cutting and everything of that nature, just because um, I've kind of embedded that as the world in, and I kind of want to keep that in the world.
Okay. I'm curious now. Who are some of your influences that changed your style of directing?
Mm. Um, Ava DuVernay,
Okay.
specifically Queen Sugar.
Oh, okay.
When I was starting my MFA, because Exposed is my MFA thesis, so I've been working on Exposed for about not including this year, for about a year and a half. So when thinking about visual style and directorial style, I had to think of like not just films, I had to think of television.
Yeah.
So I started to look at cinematographic or cinematographic television, like what, not just your linear, like what looks like on your NBCs and CBSs, or but I'm talking about like what's on your OTT networks that are costing more money than X, Y, and Z. And I wanted to, in Queen Sugar was one of those shows that I've seen and I've been following forever. But the cinematography is so crisp, it's so clean, it's so seamless, and I love the camera angles and the shot design that they implied. And each director is a woman, and they have a different
Oh, okay.
style that they kind of adapt and put onto this world that Ava has set and Anthony Sparks have set into play, which I really, 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 really I made my team watch it. I made my
Oh,
team like study it. I
wow.
sent them books, I sent them pictures, I sent them everything. But Ava DuVernay was a big, big one. Um uh I would say Noah's Ark,
Okay.
which is Patrick Ian Polk. Ian Polk, I mean, he's kind of one of the blueprints
Yeah.
for black queer television. But
Yeah.
specifically for me, he was a blueprint for my dissertation, for my MFA dissertation. But he was also a blueprint for an ensemble of black queer leads. And it's
Yeah.
like that's something that I'm bringing to the surface. So it's like I need to study how he writes these characters, and not only does he write the main character, but how does he write all of his friends that are not monolithically
Yeah.
gay, that they're not the same, they're
Yeah.
all different types and levels and facets of being queer. And I think
Yeah.
that was one thing that I not just was inspired by, but not just on a, oh, like we're gonna it's just gonna be a gay show, but we want to show different life in gay. We want
Yeah.
to show different facets in gay, because it's not just all hypersexual. It's not all
Yes.
it's not white. It's like
Yeah.
we gotta show a little bit more than just the drag, and we want to show some drama. We want to show
Yeah.
some real issues that are going on that we go through every day that maybe the public doesn't see, or they just have not or haven't not seen on the screen. And I think that's something that I really wanted to bring into to play. So he was a very much big inspiration, not just on um trying to make a television show with a queer lead, but just the fact that, I mean, he has a gold. It's like not a gold mine, but it's just basically you created something that we are all queer filmmakers are trying to keep going. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a very inspiration. It's a big inspiration for me, and just in the writing that we do for Exposed.
Okay.
Um, it's a big thing. Yeah.
Okay. You founded Ivy Vision Corporation and have IVTV. So will
Mhm.
Expose stream on IVTV or somewhere else?
Well, that's a great question. We're gonna take it through the festival circuit as we are
Okay.
doing now,
Yeah.
and we are trying to get it pitched and get it off the ground. Of course, we were halted with the strike
Yeah.
situation that we're just slowly trying to get out of,
Yeah.
but that's the goal. We want to at least try and attempt to get it in front of a studio, in front of a production or producing or production company partner, so that we can make more episodes and make more content. Um, a goal for me as a director, or I guess as a showrunner, is to one, not just complete it, but I want to give the people that work on it their flowers as well. Like the talent that we've had and the cast, they've been they've been the same role for 3 years. So I kind of want them to fulfill that role, all the way through. Even if we don't get picked up for another season, that's fine. I just kind of feel accomplished with getting that out there. And so that's kind of the route that we're aiming for.
Okay.
So pitching is going to come soon, but if pitching does not go soon, or does not come our way, and we just go into an independent route, then of course it will definitely be on IVTV, along right next to Expose or
Okay.
Exposure.
I
So
mentioned your corporation, but can you tell our audience more about it?
it was a gift. I always like to start it off with where the origin comes from, because a
Okay.
lot of people just think that, like, okay, Joel, you just have a company. It's like,
Mhm.
no, it's kind of like a safety box for me if you think of it. And that's kind of like what my mother thought of it. So she gifted it to me when for my birthday, when I was in 2019. I got
Okay.
it early, and the anniversary is November 19th.
Oh,
So that's kind of the official day that we kind of declared that we were an official company.
yeah.
And she did it for the reason of protection of my work. So I had done at that moment 4 films, and I just didn't have a place to I had a place to put them, but like basically covering them on a production or a legal way. How do you
Yeah.
do that? And she was
Yeah.
like, well, you have to put it under like an LLC. So she gifted me an LLC, her and my godfather.
Oh,
Um, and that's kind of how it came up to be. But when I got it, I didn't know what to do with it for the first 2 years, like for the first year. So it was kind of like, oh, I have this company, but it's like I'm just putting my name on top of these films just to make sure it was done. But I slowly started to realize that it was more than that, that I could make it more than that.
okay.
So eventually, I came up with a plan of how I wanted to run, or how I envisioned vision to be later on in life. I didn't see it solely working in just film and television and production. I saw it breaking into different avenues. I wanted one thing that one of our first divisions is casting, just because I was a casting um assistant for like 2 years. And I love casting. That was literally like, I love talent. I'm really good with talent relations, and have a lot of my friends are actors. So I just felt like that was one thing that I wanted. So I was like, okay, Ivy casting. And not just that's our casting division, but I want it to be like later, like a talent relations and a management, like, where we can, it's like almost like an agency, we can, that's kind of like the imprint, or kind of how I see it there. Then we have IVTV, which is kind of like our OTT service where we can distribute anything that we make out of Vision. And that's kind of like a safe place for me. So it's not getting distracted or boggled up with all the rest of the content that's on YouTube or Vimeo.
Yeah.
I wanted a place where you can directly come and find and watch all of our content in one space. Then I have the writers, in-house writers development room, which is something that's always in working and always changing, just because we work on Expose for a little bit, then we'll work on something totally different, then we'll maybe come back to Expose because we're shooting Exposure or we're shooting a different thing that is a part of that world. So I have a team of writers that I like. We always meet when things are popping, when things are getting ready to be shot, and we need to overview things, or whenever someone has an idea that they want to workshop and expand on, we have a space for that. So I've always wanted to have a space for writers and a safe space for writers to come and share their ideas, not to feel judged, not to feel condemned, but also to have a place to develop that material into something bigger if they wanted to pitch it out or if they wanted to put it into production.
Okay.
And then I think, wow, oh, the latest one, Ivy Sound. Ivy Sound and Ivy Post used to be together. They're different. Ivy Post handles all of our post production services when it comes to sound editing, coloring, picture editing, and eventually we'll get into like podcast editing and
Okay.
a little bit more of a freelance when it comes to like branded content and ad, and hopefully we'll get into some of those different elements soon. But the latest one that I'm more excited about, just because we just launched it last year, and it's we've been having multiple meetings on how we're going to kind of get it off the ground and kind of see where it can take off, is Ivy Sound.
Okay.
Ivy Sound, we launched it with the soundtrack album for Exposed Back to Black, and all the music is original. I executive produced the album and curated it with team of the Ivy team.
You interned at TV1, and which was founded by Kathy Hughes in 1988.
Yes.
It's a Black entertainment network. And so I wanted to know, what was your biggest lesson learned interning at TV1?
I worked at TV1 for 6 months,
Yep.
and I had it was remote. First of all, it was kind of
Oh,
like
okay.
during the end of the pandemic.
No problem.
It was a remote internship. I was the only intern in programming and production. So I felt very special, but I
Yeah.
also felt very green.
Yeah.
Like very, very green. It
Yeah.
was my first network job. Everything like that was kind of very new to me.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that I took away or I learned from working at uh, TV1 was the importance of knowing content and viewership and your audience, your target audience. Knowing your target audience helps a lot when it comes to programming. My big assignment at TV1 was creating a fast channel. I don't know if a lot of people don't know like y'all. A lot of the public know what fast channels are. They just don't know that they're called fast channels. But basically, fast channels are like those blocks of programming on television or on streaming that are, whether they're like marathons or recycled content, like
Yeah.
reruns and things that are that. All of that is not just like we're slapping episodes together for people to watch. No, we're taking the analytics of the top viewed episodes in that season or in that our premiere date, and we're breaking them into a programming slate versus like, from the morning drive to the afternoon to prime time to late night. So all of that is on purpose. It's not just random. So that's one thing that I learned, and how tedious it is to know your Nielsen numbers and your ratings, and how important and how those dictate what shows stay on and how those shows do, and the funding that those shows get. So yeah, that's why do shows get canceled? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a fun time. I love working with Black people. I thought that was fun, just being at a media conglomerate ran by Black people,
Yeah.
and you're working and your coworkers are Black.
I love your personal mission statement, by the way. So your personal mission statement is to develop programming to bring life to underrepresented stories in the Black and LGBTQ plus communities. What are your top 5 favorite Black LGBTQ plus movies, TV shows, and or web series, and why?
Oh. Mm. Okay, well, I just said Noah's Ark, so you got that one.
Yeah.
Um, I okay. Noah's Ark. The Boys. Yes, the YouTube series. Fans of that. One of my friends was on the show, so
Oh,
kind of biased on that show. Ashton was on the show, so love that show. Would love for that to come on my screen, like
ah,
not just my computer screen, but I'm talking about like my screen downstairs. Like I would love to see that. I guess Pose is one of my favorites. I thought Pose was very pivotal for not just queer television, but television in general.
yeah,
And I really love that that whole era, that phase that we were in. I hate that it ended. It ended
yeah,
so kind of like abruptly, and I
yeah,
kind of wasn't ready for it. I was wishing that they had something to replace that.
yeah.
But I would probably also say la, 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 la. I just watched a new show
Mhm.
called, it's not new. It's actually been out, but it has
Okay.
to deal with a black queer lead called Interview with a Vampire. Have you seen
Oh,
the new reboot of that?
yeah,
That was interesting.
yeah,
I would say because I like sci-fi. I like fantasy and the fantasy realm of like Vampire Diaries and stuff like that. So I'm really
yeah,
into supernatural.
yeah,
But I thought this was a very different take on, if you've seen the traditional Interview with the Vampire, like the original, I felt like this was a very different take.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
it's like not just black,
yeah,
but it's like it's black and gay, and then we're
yeah,
hitting like this medium of like, well, you're dating a white man, and it's like, are you bisexual? Like you're hitting like topics that we go through in gay life, or like especially in black gay life,
yeah,
that he's going through like in decades before this
yeah,
is going on. So I love when we hit those hard topics. I think like Noah's Ark does a great job with that. Pose does a great job with that. And like this other show, and I need one more. I think I'm at four, right?
yeah.
I'm at four. Okay. Gosh, queer show, queer show that I like. Um, what did I just watch? I watched a queer show that I wanted. Oh gosh,
It could be a movie
I'm.
as well.
It could be a movie.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, my favorite queer movie is Moonlight. I think I'm biased on that one.
yeah.
But I will say, I guess my other favorite queer movie outside of Moonlight would have to be the watermelon, the watermelon woman.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
yes, I forget her name, but Cheryl.
yeah,
I studied her in school. My professor, um, he was like, "You have to watch this movie because
yeah.
I was doing queer studies for the topic of my dissertation."
Okay.
So I was like, "I need to watch this," but I was watching just a whole bunch of gay. But I wanted to watch some lesbian movies as well.
Yeah,
So I watched that, and it was so funny. Like it was just so relatable. It was so funny, and I think that's kind of what introduced me to maybe tap into comedy a little bit more, because
okay.
I'm more of a dramatic writer.
Mm,
So I guess watching Cheryl Dunn, watching her that was her thesis from UCLA.
oh,
Um, I just loved it. I was just like, I kind of like wanted to make, or it kind of inspired me to make something that was a little bit more authentic in a comedic realm,
yeah,
for that. And I just love it. I love that she was thinking about us now in the 1990s, early in the 1990s, of kind of like what would a queer insecure kind of look like. And that's kind
yeah.
of what the Watermelon Woman gives, which is really
Okay.
interesting.
It has been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Too.
And
Unfortunately, the team and I will not be there, but we do wish everybody that was selected and competing at the festival very much good energy, good luck.